Welcome to Super Writers Tuesday. Today's question comes from an Apex member on Discord. She asks, how do I critique another writer in my writing group? Well, the answer to that's kind of complex because, first of all, I think you'd like to ask how would you like to be critiqued? In other words, the first thing that I like to do when I'm critiquing someone is compliment them. Everybody starts where they begin as writers, and some people are really new and really raw. Other people have tremendous skills, and it's difficult to know whether those skills were nurtured or whether they came to them naturally and easily. And so I like to look at them and say, okay, here's what you're doing, and here's what you're doing right. This is what I enjoy. And then I look for weaknesses. Now, when I have a weakness, I don't necessarily try to tell a person, gosh, this is what you're doing wrong. Okay. What I do is I point out and I try to tell the reader or the writer how the story makes me feel as a reader. In other words, if I laugh at a joke and you are intending to tell a joke, that's good. If I laugh at a joke and you weren't intending to tell a joke, that's very, very bad. And so a lot of times the best critiques are simply going through and saying, this section makes me hungry. This section is exciting. I can't wait to read the next page. Those kinds of critiques are really, really helpful because what it does is it allows the author to know whether you are engaged as a reader and what's going on. Correcting typing and saying, okay, this comma is out of place, or don't you know that you should use the past perfect tense here, or something like that. That's not particularly helpful. It's helpful if there's a dropped word that maybe, as a reader, as a writer, as I'm going through, I know what I intended to say. And so when I'm reading a passage, I may actually insert the correct wording subconsciously so that I'm not even seeing that, hey, the audience has a dropped word here or something like that. So it's okay to go ahead and mention those kinds of things, but that's not the same thing as a substantive critique. The substantive critique critiques a number of things. One of them is, what's the concept of the story? What is the basic big idea? Is it a good idea? Is it one that we've seen 1,000 times before and so the editor's going to be tired of it? Or is there an angle that's promising that the author has put forward that maybe they didn't really deliver quite as well as they would like to? So I try to look at the concept for the story and say, this is a great idea for a story. What more could we do with it? That's the first question I try to ask. Next thing, I look at the story itself. When a character is confronted with a problem, are they confronted with it fairly quickly? Is it an interesting problem? Is it universal? How engrossing is that problem going to be? Does the author take advantage of those questions? Okay, do they look at the problem and say, okay, this character, for example, is going to have a problem because he's fallen in love with a girl and he's only 17 and he's not going to be able to take care of her. What could he possibly do to try to remedy that problem? And so you look at it and you say, did the character take the proper steps to try to resolve the problem, or did they go off in some weird tangent and the story headed a different direction? Those are the kinds of things I look at. So I'm going to be looking at the plot issues. And then last of all, style. Style is something that I don't like to make a lot of comments on. People choose a voice and a tone and a style. The problem that you get sometimes is that new writers don't really choose a tone or a voice. They go ahead and they say, yeah, this is the way that I write, this is the way I talk, and they just tell it that way. Well, you're an entertainer. When you're entertaining, you want to make sure that you bring all of your skills to the table, that you're doing your best to keep the reader riveted. And so when you're doing this, it's important to pay attention to your diction and the tone of your characters and the voices of the characters and things like this. And so there's a lot that goes into it. The question comes back to, how much do you feel comfortable telling a person? If it's a close friend, then you might give them a deep critique where you're being completely frank and honest. But I think a lot of times when you're starting out, you need to try to develop that relationship. And that may not appear until after you have critiqued half a dozen manuscripts for each other. Okay, because it builds a certain trust and a relationship before you can really talk about issues, as if you're trying to critique your own manuscript. You have to kind of find out just how touchy an author is. Some authors don't really want criticism. Some authors come in wanting praise. They want you to discover them and to clap them on the back and welcome them to the fold. And then if you come in and you criticize them, they're like, "Whoa, I wasn't expecting that." And so you've got to be pretty gentle in those cases. In other cases, I was always the kind of person who I was like, "Go ahead, give me your best shot." I want to get as much as I possibly can. I don't want to find out what's right about the manuscript. Tell me what you see that's wrong. That's not a proper way to look at it either. As an author, you want to be open to criticism. You want to look for what's right because you want to know what is working. And sometimes you think that a manuscript is working and maybe it's not really working. And if somebody doesn't mention it, then you have to look at it and say, okay, maybe that isn't working as well as I thought. Okay, for example, if I've got humor and I've written a bunch of jokes and nobody comments on the jokes and says, oh, those made me laugh, or if I write a romance scene and people don't say, oh my gosh, I was so, involved in this, then maybe the romance scene isn't working as well as I thought. So I as an author need to know how you're feeling, how you're receiving it. Don't ever tell people that, oh yes, I'm being completely objective here. Writing is not meant to be enjoyed objectively, okay? That's like saying, I created this wonderful Thanksgiving dinner for you with this, panoply of exotic tastes and saying, here's food, consume it. Okay, we are not objective creatures. We're trying to pull out an emotional performance for people, and so forget objectivity. Okay, go ahead and be subjective. That's fine. This has been Super Writers Tuesday. Happy writing.